We're inside Garage 25 here at the Boatworks in Coomera. We're ready for Bulwarks and Bulldust. We've got Wes Moxey with us today, so let's get him in the captain's chair and get going. Welcome to Bulwarks and Bulldust, and today very pleased to have Wes Moxey in the captain's chair by Melfi Designs. From inside here in the Garage 25 at the Boatworks, Wes, really great to see you. Thank you so much for coming along. And we're not telling you that you've got to ride off into the sunset, but 40 years, what a fantastic journey from the tools to the CEO. Please tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, next weekend, John, I'm 65, so that used to mean something once, but to me it's just another day. So 40 years. Grew up in a dairy farm, milking cows. What do you learn milking cows? If you ever been in a dairy farm, you want to see your dad, your mum, you work hard, you go to the dairy. So what do? You learn to work. And I was the youngest of three boys. My dad said, no future here, son, go and get an apprenticeship, and then you can come back to the farm once you've got a trade behind you. So he was the president of Rotary, and the vice president of Rotary happened to own a shipyard called Carrington Slipways at Hexham, Tomago, and in Newcastle. So that was just down the road from our dairy farm. And I ended up there as a shipwright apprentice starting on the 15th of January 1976. So 15 years of age, started an apprenticeship as a shipwright, and had to go through a pretty stringent selection process. Got the Guernsey. I was the only shipwright apprentice that year, and I did very well in my trade. I was top apprentice in New South Wales, and the last ship we ever built that I worked on in that shipyard was the HMAS Tobruk, which is now sunk off Bundaberg.
Yeah, did a sea trip on that once upon a time, yeah.
So I did the comm centre behind the wheelhouse and the davit cranes and a few other things, and that was one of the reasons that I left Newcastle, to be honest. Carrington Slipways, for those who know the story, was a fabulous company to work for. Really, really good at taking care of their staff, training, all those sorts of things. So I got very good foundations at a good age on top of my work ethic from my parents. So that put me in a good stead. 21 years of age, me and a couple of mates wanted to have a change. I had an uncle up here and family up here on the Gold Coast, Bruce Harris from Sharkcat. He's my uncle. My brother was up here as a motor mechanic, and jumped in the car and let's go to Queensland and figure out what we're going to do. So 5.5 years into a successful trade, young tradesman, moved to Queensland, not really knowing what for, why for, or where I was going. So that was 81, 82. I ended up at Riviera. Bob Parkin was the general manager at the time. And my uncle, Bruce Harris, said, go down to Riviera. They're looking for people. I was currently working at Runaway Bay Marina as a young boat builder, working for myself as a contractor. And Bob said to me, do you know what a torture board is? Yep. Didn't have a clue because I'd grown up in steel ships and that sort of thing. So I didn't have a clue. Righto, start tomorrow. And so that was August 1982. So that was the start of it. So early days of Riviera was cutting my teeth in plugs, moulds, new product development, all that sort of thing, learning the craft, really the first 4 or 5 years. And I ended up doing fit out one contracts, varnish contracts, as a contractor employing about 22 people. So then stock market crashed, 1987. I led a bit of a palace revolution and fronted Bill and Bob Parkin and said, you guys don't know what you're doing, you're not looking after this, you're not doing that. Communication's terrible. And Bill said, well, words to the effect, you're so smart, you sort it out. So self-appointed production manager. Over the next year or so, I gave up my contracts and focused more on the management, production management, all that sort of thing. Bob had left a little while after that, gone to work elsewhere, so I was self-appointed GM. Bill bought Mariner back at that same time in Sydney. And Kendall, his brother that worked in the business, moved back to Sydney to look after Mariner Cruises. And effectively Helen, my wife, who was at Riviera before I started, she was there in 81, I started in 82. We stayed in Queensland and looked after it, and Bill went backwards and forwards. That was the early days of Riviera, what it was sort of like. There was no career discussions or you do this and you do that. It was, you know, if you're tough enough and work hard enough, you'll survive. If not, you're out.
It's kind of incredible now when we think about the progression we try and take people through to be a little bit more like, you want it, you take it.
To today's world, we still run a little bit of that philosophy at Riviera, but kids today, I know from my own two kids, they're looking for more career path, more conversations, more certainty around what all that means. So, you know, it's a very different world today. But, you know, after nearly 39 years, 40 years next year that I've been in and around Riviera, I've seen the changes in the product, the people, the processes, property, everything we do. So, yeah, it's been a lifetime of work.
Yeah, and back in those days, of course, too, that was sort of in the 400 boat per year mark. They were obviously smaller vessels in those days as opposed
Not
to...
in the 80s and 90s. At the back end of the 90s, early 2000s, our peak was 425. Smaller boats, 29 feet, 30 feet, 37 feet, 36, all of that. Stern drive product, there was a lot of that built in the Mariner Riviera sort of period there of stern drive product. When you had other brands in Australia building that sort of boat as well, Mustang. Sunrunner, those guys that are gone now. So that was our peak. In 2008, when I left, that year we delivered 326 boats to June 30, 2008. And I finished up in August 2008. So that was a very different period to even the early 2000s. The cost of the product, the complexity of the product, the amount we were building, what it all was. You know, we were a big business in 2008. Then I retired, never thought I'd really go back to building boats or back to Riviera. Here we are.
Here we are. Yeah. Careful what you comment on out loud. But I think the big thing too, of course, is that, you know, the vessels are going out to the world, and it's a fantastic and wonderful export story. And they're even more complex than the complex boats you were talking about of 20 years ago. And the value inside them in terms of fit out and all the rest of it, it's just incredible. And 150 vessels a year, and it's almost like a dance card where you have to move the pieces around to make sure that there's the space for a boat that's coming out of a mould or one that's got to go off and be tested and everything. It's an incredible scenario.
You never stop moving the puzzle, changing the product, looking for how we improve, looking for benefits. It's a never ending. The minute you stop, you're going backwards. So we never stop pushing forward in all areas, the product, the people, and then therefore the profits come. If you get those, I call it the 3 Ps. If you get them right, you got to get the product right first, then the people, then the profits will come. Don't worry about the profits. You got to get the other 2 right first. So that's the way we look at everything we do.
Given that you've had such a massive change from steel ships in the case of Tobruk, and then obviously GRP, and grown from being on the tools to then managing all these other people in the process, what's the one thing today, right here, right now, that you love the most from my conversations with you? I'd have to say it's that product development, but please tell me what your thoughts are.
Look, I love seeing people do well. I've got 2 sons, both work at Riviera. One's an electrician, the youngest one, he's 24, 25 this year, and the other one's 29 this year, 28 now, and he did a diesel fitters course at Riv, a hull fit out and all that sort of thing. He's been living in Fort Lauderdale for 2 years and is our service manager for our biggest dealer, One Water Yacht Group. So seeing those guys do well, and it keeps me young and in touch with how they think, and what they think. And it's different to how I was brought up. You know, those kids grew up and saw a lot of the world. And keeping in mind, we started exporting in 1986. That was our first boat to the US. It's a long way back from now.
Sure.
And the product we were exporting back then is very different to the product we're exporting today. And the perception of the brand, what it was then, was all about price. And I've been at Miami Boat Show where people have walked on the boat and said, "Why is this boat so cheap? And what's it weigh? What have you left out of it? That sort of conversation. Well, that was 30 years ago. Today, you never get that conversation because Riviera has established itself as a premium brand, proposition. We've been in the market consistently for that 30 plus years and earned our reputation for what we are: reliable, trustworthy, good value. They support us, all those sorts of things.
Strong build.
Yeah, all of those things. So that's what we are. So what excites me, it's a combination of the product and the people. Right. We've trained, we've grown an awful lot of people within Riviera, and we treat them well while they're at Riviera. That doesn't mean they always stay. They go, they start their own businesses, they go mining, they do all these sorts of things, as I did as a young guy. I understand that. Some people want to chase that. Others stay there for, 25, 30 years as well.
Yes.
There's no rule book around what that should or shouldn't be.
And I imagine you've also seen quite a few of them come back because some of them do go off and do some of those other things that you were describing, but then return back to the fold.
For sure. And there's quite a few of the guys go off to the mines. We can't compete with the mines. When you talk about manufacturing in Australia, what's hurt it? Mining. Because they pay wages that the manufacturing, whether it's boats, cars or anything, we just can't pay what miners are prepared to pay and have to pay. Yeah, they're remote jobs, fly in, fly out, but we'll typically find a young guy, done his apprenticeship, maybe 1 or 2 years out, now wants to chase the dollar, and he'll go and establish himself and his life for 5 years in the mine, come back at 28, 29, bought a house, wife, first child, I want a stable job, Riv treated me well, come back. Now, nothing makes us more happy than that person coming back because they know who we are, how we operate, and they fit straight in. And they've earned the big bucks and now understand the lifestyle doesn't always match. So you go home every night, you sleep in your own bed and you're with your wife and kids, it's a different thing to fly in, fly out mining.
Well, it's always been a big thing, hasn't it, for you and Rodney, is that people side of it, isn't it? It's a strong thing that comes out in all the conversations.
Yeah, for sure. We both come through the TAFE trade system. He's a carpenter and joiner, so he did a trade early days in the early 80s. He's 5 years younger than me, but it came through the same school of hard knocks. You want it, you go work for it. You don't get a career path. You want it, you go get it. Make it your own. So we're passionate about that and have been for a very long time. And it's not just about Riviera. It's about creating good Australians. Our Propel program, our apprenticeship things that we do, 2 hours a month, talking about everything other than work, but their life skills. That's what Rodney's as passionate about that as what I am, if not more passionate. He's got 3 young boys, so very much we want a good Australia.
Indeed.
Well, you mentioned the car industry. Obviously, they killed the car industry here. They haven't killed the boat industry, luckily, but there's daily challenges, I'm sure. The federal government has been talking about assisting Australian manufacturing, becoming a sovereign manufacturing country.
About 30 years too late.
They did everything they could 40, 30 years ago.
We had to be the smart country, remember?
Yes.
We're not going to work with our hands anymore.
So
we're just going to be the smart country.
So you're calling Bulldust on the federal government's claim to assist manufacturers?
They don't know where to start. They don't think like I do. They haven't done a trade. They've never run a business.
No, they don't.
They've never had to pay 900 people every week. So how'd they get there? How'd they get to run the country? And through Bulldust.
Yeah.
So effectively for me, why did I leave Newcastle if I go all the way back to the 80s? The Tobruk, we'd have 35 Navy guys in. I was a young shipwright and we would build things to a plan, fit washing machines, dryers, cabinetry, do all this sort of stuff. If something didn't work as per the drawing, which always is the case on a commercial ship or a Navy ship, you would go and get your foreman, leading hand foreman, they'd come and have a look, you'd go and get the owner's rep, the surveyor, you'd nut it out, do an as-built drawing. And I would carry on as a shipwright doing my work. Navy, you'd get half a dozen people turn up, oh yeah, you're right, right, we better go back to Canberra and ask. So I'd have to pack up all my gear, go and check all that equipment back into the store, go and get another job, while someone thought about it. And that's just not commercial enough. Then I roll forward to the 90s, and I had a friend in the Queensland Water Police, and he said, come on, Wes, you can build a water police boat. Come on. And anyway, cut a long story short, we agreed to do it, and Bill said, right, let's do this, let's do that. And it wasn't a production boat. Production hull, different deck, forward-facing windscreen, water police style boat. We probably spent in those days 30, 35 grand in real cost to present the drawings and the documentation to meet the contract and do all that. I dutifully go off to the opening of the contracts where they read out who, and some people, one piece of paper, here's the number, other people put in plans, all that sort of thing. And a couple of weeks later, I wrote down all the names, who quoted what happened. A couple of weeks later, I went, haven't heard anything from the government. I wonder what's going on. I wonder what's happening with all that. So I ring up state stores. Oh, that contract's been let to such and such a company. And I went, they were 200 grand a boat more than us. We didn't get a phone call. So what upset me most was not losing the contract, is we invested time, money and energy and we never learnt a thing. We got no feedback, nothing. So I said, never again.
Yeah.
Because if I stuff up something in the Riviera brand or one of the other guys do it, we own it. But there I'm just going to a lottery of a government whim. Why are they giving that guy 200 grand a boat more? That's 400,000 more than us. We didn't learn anything. They could have come back and said, right, you're deficient in these areas. You're in the top 3. What would it cost to do blah, blah, blah? We would have learnt something, but we got zero feedback. So now any government tender contract comes to us, it's just zero interest, in the bin, done.
Sure.
Because we're not in control of the outcome.
No, understood. So if you were in one of your beautiful Riviera boats and you parked on a gorgeous beach on a deserted island and found a genie's bottle, Wes, and you gave it a rub and you had one wish from government, what would it be?
I would make university and also the TAFE system and the education system more accountable to what they are doing. We're seeing a little bit of that in the US right now, and there's a huge uproar over it because people don't understand it. But once upon a time, when I went to school in the 70s, to be a manual arts teacher, you had to have done a trade. It's a different mindset. Once you've done a trade and you can't explain it to people who haven't done a trade, you just think differently because you've got to think on your feet. You've got to make decisions on your feet that keep that job moving if you want to be the best at what you want to do.
And solve problems.
Problem solver.
Yeah.
Plan your next role, plan your next job. What am I doing? How am I going? Because I'm in control of whether I go broke or not. So, that tradie mindset and that small business mindset is a long way from where the education system is. And kids today, you hear it over and over and over, they're not job ready.
Yeah.
They're not job ready. You go to the universities now, and TAFE was always, through the 90s and 2000s, the poor cousin to university. We were seen as make up the numbers, but you're not worth anything. What's a tradie worth today? Can't get enough of them. You hear it over and over and over from the government. They didn't value us in the 90s and the 2000s. We've got to be the smart country. We can't work with our hands. Well, who's going to build the houses? Who's going to build what we need? Who's going to build the infrastructure for the smart people? People with their hands.
Yeah.
So don't devalue people working with their hands. If anything, uplift them and then make your universities accountable. They might train, as an example, 2,000 mechanical engineers. But does the market need 2,000 mechanical engineers? We train what we need. The outcomes are very different. There's a job for them at the end of 4 years. We're training to grow, not to shrink, right? Or not to throw them on the scrap heap. So the universities can train, and they've turned university now into a business about cash. And the bosses of the universities are paid more than the Prime Minister. Is that right? No, it's not. It's not right. So the system is wrong. The system in education and training young people and still telling them you've got to do a degree or you'll be nothing, is just the wrong message, in my view.
Must be very difficult though. You do have a very large staff base. Manufacturing products here in Australia, labour costs are high. You mentioned that they go off to the mines, but still you have to pay people a lot of money to do what they do. Remaining competitive in a global market must always be a challenge, especially when you're competing with other countries that subsidise their workforces.
Oh, very much so, but we tend to worry about what we can control and what's in our control. We run a model that incentivises and holds our staff accountable, one and the same. You don't hear accountability in the government, do you? You don't hear you scratch it, you lost it, you stole it, someone's accountable. Honesty around that. So our system that we've developed over many years is about the harder you work, the more I make. What a novel idea.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about productivity, but how do they manage productivity and what's that happen? We put a set price down to do a job. Harder I work, the better I do it, the more I make. So, that piecemeal type situation is what keeps us competitive, at what keeps our staff happy, and people can grow to whatever they want to be. How I started at Riviera.
Yes.
So I'm a strong believer in it. If you have a lot of hourly rate just employees that aren't incentivised and aren't accountable, you can just become fat and lazy. So we don't like that system. We like to be playing the game every day hard.
Yeah, well, it would be nice if our politicians were held accountable for their actions and the things they do. I mean, anybody in business is held accountable, and there's all sorts of parameters around that and penalties around how you operate when you're running a corporation. But government doesn't have that responsibility.
The trouble is, where does communism and capitalism collide? In the way I see it, the big corporations go to where the cheapest manufacturing is. That doesn't always mean it's accountable, does it?
No.
And what happens in communist China collides with capitalism in the stock market. And it doesn't have morals, in my view. We're not publicly traded, we're a private company, and Rodney's a great owner of Riviera, and that is a really good model, but it's a hard one, because, you got one guy, hard in the sense that, you got one guy who's totally up to here, in everything that we do, which is awesome because you can get quick decisions, you can be quick on your feet. But from the other side of it, you don't have unlimited funds, so you got to work harder to make it work. So but that's okay. We're not scared of that at all. I've been through private ownership, private equity ownership, back to private, and I can tell you, private equity should not be involved in the marine business.
We discovered some gold dust earlier on, talking about the unleashing of the bull dust. But earlier on, when we were talking, there was some gold dust reflecting around the Australian government now saying that Australia is going to build after we're going to be the smart country. Now we're going to be the build country. But I believe you had a really wonderful reflection on your belief of government.
Well, they're 30 years. They're 30 years too late. When that message should have happened 30 years ago. Why would you have all the manufacturers pull out of Australia and import every government car? You think of the amount of police cars. And one of the guys who worked for me at Riviera in the early 2000s left, and he's in the finance area, and went and he was effectively the CFO for the New South Wales police force. And I used to catch up with him at every Sydney boat show, and his name was Aidan. And I said, Aidan, what? And it was right in the time of GM pulling out of Australia. He said, Wes, we've stockpiled Commodores for 3 years because they're $55,000 each as a highway patrol car. But I can't go beyond that. All the testing and everything we've done for the replacements are looking like 95 to 110. He said, I haven't got the budget for it. Did the government consider that when they were talking to GM, when they were talking to Toyota about what government cars we need? Just think of that. If they could have provided all of the vans, dual cabs, Statesman's, all of that between Toyota and GM. Wouldn't you have found a way to incentivise them to stay here? And Australia used to be the rear-wheel drive capital for GM for the Middle East to export cars to. Now it's gone. It's gone. And it'll never come back.
So I believe your comment was reflecting around the fact of please stay out. Don't knock on the door of manufacturing.
Well, they don't know how to help. They don't know what to do. And they've only got a 3 to 4 year, election cycle, and it's all about being popular. So, I guess I'm too old and cranky to think that they can.
Welcome to Bulwarks and Bulldust.
So, I guess realistically.
We're going to make the table longer.
Joining as the fourth person will be Wes.
So, realistically, what are they going to do? Throw money at you? When we were building out here, this was a cow paddock, effectively. Waterway Drive was a cow paddock. And I sat through numerous government council meetings to get this precinct up. Myself, Pat Gay, and Paul Phelan from Telwater, trying to bring this together and what we had to do. And they were talking to us about, we're incentivising Bertram and this one and that one to come here. And I went, you're dreaming. You're dreaming. Why would an international manufacturer manufacture in Australia? Why? Because you're going to give them a couple of $1 million? What about payroll tax? Most ridiculous tax in the world. What about company tax?
Payroll tax. It's just the more you employ,
there is no reason to manufacture in Australia other than the fact we're proud Australians. You are not going to bring an international manufacturer here unless you go and throw my tax-paying dollars at them. But because I'm here an incumbent, I get zipped, centre of a donut. Is that fair?
Well, it's a pretty good segue into the challenges of manufacturing in Australia. I guess one of the strengths of Riviera that you've had a really good domestic market and an export marketplace, and it allows you to navigate the currency change and all the rest of it. But what does that look like going forwards? I mean, you need the headcount to be able to manufacture at level. How do you bring new people through? What's the strategies going forward in terms of bringing young people through and also bringing experience in?
Again, lessons learned, from the private equity days to the private ownership days. When private equity was there, and we're a pretty big business back in those days, the private equity guys would look at me and say, there's plenty of things said, but how do we get Wes out of the business? And we spend an enormous amount of money
on that question,
on consultants, on lean manufacturing, Toyota train guys, huge amount of money on that. So, it's what we found from that, the best people at Riviera are the ones we grow within. None of those people that we brought in as professional shed managers, line managers, all these different things we did are there today. And why aren't they there? Because they haven't grown up with us. They don't understand. They haven't got the Riviera DNA, blood.
Well, I was going to say to you, one of the hardest things against competing against Riviera in a marketplace, which I can speak about, is the brand loyalty to Riviera. Yeah. So it's really interesting you say that. That comes from within as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I have never yelled at a staff member at Riviera or sworn at them or ever. My 40 years there. Why? I don't have to. I've never had to ask them to work hard. They know I do. And a fish rots from the head. So if the head guy is not in it, on it, going with it, you're not going to get the follow-up. But that's who we are, what we are. Rodney's the same. Kyle's the same. Kyle's, the production director now. And Kyle's started as a detailer. When I sacked his predecessor, who was with me for 20 years, did his apprenticeship there, I said, and why did I sack him? His work ethic, his leadership were not there. Brilliant guy, very talented, very good boat builder, but leadership and can-do attitude just wasn't there. And the guys were going around him. And I would say to him, if they're going around you coming to me, you're not being effective. So I let him go in the nicest possible manner. And then it got everyone together and said, right, I'm going to do his job and my job. Whoever wants it, come get it. 2 years later, Kyle turned up. How did he turn up? Work ethic, consistently. Didn't walk in with Can I get a job? Can I do that? His work ethic is what got him there, and his can-do attitude. That's the difference. That's how I got there.
Wes, if you look at it with a 40-year journey, how big do you think the Riviera production family, not the customer family, just the production family over the journey, what sort of number of people have, to some degree, Riviera blood in them?
Well, we got nearly 150 plus apprentices now. And, you know, I think to answer that question, I need to tell you where Rodney's ownership started in March 2012. And I was retired August 2008 and happy on my farm, little beef cattle property I had in northern New South Wales. And Grand Banks chased me to join their board, and I did that for a while. And I guess I wasn't a good board member because I wanted to get too much done quick. And my wife said to me, Helen, who worked at Riviera for 16 years, she was there before me, and she had, you know, kids and all that sort of thing. So she finished up, but she said, you're too young to retire. I was 48. You got too much knowledge. You're too passionate about it. Go and have a go yourself. So that's where Belize came from. And I said, well, I'm not doing it in Australia, and I'm going to have a look around whether I do it in Taiwan, China, whatever. Why? Because I could walk in with a set of plans and say how much. How much for the plugs, how much for the moulds, how much for the first boat, can I afford it? Rather than, okay, go and buy a shed, rent a shed, hire guys, buy tools, try and make a go. There's many people in Australia, case in point, that have tried to compete with Riviera. Then I respected Grand Banks immensely, and I respected Riviera immensely. I didn't want to go head to head. I wanted to build a different product, something that had tradition, style, history to it, but had modern day edge. That's what Belize formula is. So we set about doing that, and I was building the fourth boat, and Rodney rang me up and said, what's happening at Riviera? And this was February 2012. He just got back from Europe. His wife's German. Just got back from Europe and rang me up, and he'd always been a mate of mine, and, you know, the Longhurst to look at buying Riviera in 99 and various other things. They'd owned a lot of Rivieras over the time, courtesy of my relationship with them. And I said, oh, it looks like Bill's going to own it, and he's told everyone he's going to buy it. He said, why don't we have a crack at it? Why don't we buy it? I said, are you crazy? Do you know how hard that is? So, yeah, no, you'll be right. Come on, let's have a go. So 9 days later, he owned it. So that was March 12th, I think it was, March 9th, 2012. And, you know, very short space of time, there was myself, Rodney, Ross Walker and Tim Sayer that all worked on the deal with Deloitte's, and we got it done quickly. So then, okay, we got it done. I thought I'd be in and out in 5 years, and here we are 13 years later. Still going. And why? Because I enjoy it. I love what I do. I love what Rodney brings to the table and what Riviera is today and how we compete in the global market. And I've seen my kids come through it, and I'm seeing his potential for one or two of his kids, maybe not all three, but one or two of them, who knows? And he's not putting any pressure on them to do that. But if you want to be in manufacturing of boats, we're better than Riviera. But when we walked in, the day we walked in, there was 450 people at Riviera, 80 people left. And they were paid to leave by Deloitte's, you know, because we figured out we didn't need 450. And I actually had 106 on my list to go, but it got cut back to 80. So, you know, here we are. And, you know, when I left in 2008, there was 180 apprentices. When I came back in 2012, there was 4. That's a big difference. Today, we're back up to 150. And that all takes time to get that machine, momentum, grow it, because you've got to get the product right. When you buy a business that's in administration being run by Deloitte, you don't buy the liabilities, but Rodney put in a huge amount of effort and money to protecting the brand in 2012, 13, 14. And I did things that I never dreamed that I would do to protect the brand as a young boat builder. doing what we had to do. But we really protected the brand and rewarded the people that rewarded Riviera by sticking with it, the loyalty, as you've talked about. So there was a lot of that sort of stuff, but you've got to get that machine Riviera, that DNA, that blood going again of who we are, what we are. And it was, to be honest with you guys, it was harder than I ever thought it would be. It was harder and took longer to build and do. Now, that wasn't because there was investment needed. The investment was there straight away. Rodney said, what can I do to show the market I'm prepared to invest? We came out with the 445 SUV between March, August, Sydney Boat Show. We had that boat at the show.
From concept to...
Yeah.
Wow.
43, hull and deck, new hardtop, new layout, new interior, bam. That's what we did. And that boat's hugely successful, still built today, et cetera, et cetera. And it started our whole SUV program. SUV wasn't talked about in the world of boats before that period. Now there are other people talking about SUV in the marine industry. So yeah, it's those sorts of journeys, but it all gets back to people. It all gets down to creating the growth, creating the DNA, creating that love of Riviera that people will go above and beyond day in, day out.
Yeah.
Can you unpack some of those things that you thought that you wouldn't have to do to build and protect the brand? I'm fascinated.
I wasn't going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole.
I'm fascinated by that one.
Well, back when we inherited the business, Riviera was building triple-engine boats, triple-engine IPS boats.
Yeah.
Today, we don't build any triple-engine boats. And the market said, we've got nothing against pods. Give us a pod or a shaft, but don't give us 3. Give us 2. So some of the things we did in repowering, redoing boats back in that era without going into the messy detail, I never thought I'd have to do. And they weren't all in Australia either, in the US or in here. But, 40 years of being in this game, I've never been in the courthouse. So, we take care of customers and we look after them and we do what's necessary to give them the best experience we can.
Indeed. I think the biggest thing, and Lee's certainly been very clear about it, is just how hard it is to produce in this country. And it's certainly not getting any easier and not getting any cheaper either. And yet Riviera is still there making a great product and consistently doing at least 70 boats a year for other markets, at least, if not more. It really is, as you say, you almost feel like you're carrying those boats on your back across the Pacific.
No, I mean, we really enjoy what the global market brings to us. It's not, I've spent so many time on planes. If you ask an American to fly to Australia, it's like giving up their first child. You mean what? 30 hours, 24 hours on an aeroplane? Like, you've got to be kidding me.
First, they have to work out where Australia is.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Point it out on the map.
The world typically ends at the high tide mark of America.
Isn't there a big counter in Austria for all the ones they have to divert to Australia from there?
They don't understand that. But for me, as a young Aussie, I just saw travel and learning, and I'm fortunate I've got a great memory, thanks to my mum. I remember what I see and I take lots of pictures and I give the factory lots of feedback and help them all understand what the global market is. I mean, I had a conversation this morning about Palm Beach Boat Show in Florida and how it's easy to sit in Australia and have an opinion around what that is and how it is. But that opinion mightn't be an well-educated opinion as well. So, there's things that I've learnt and experienced over the years that I need to constantly reinforce back in the Riviera home base at Coomera. So I don't see us having a global market and carrying them on my back per se. I see it as exciting. We trade in US dollars. It really is the strength of who we are, and we've been doing it that way for 30 years. I had an argument with Bill about selling in US dollars versus Aussie dollars. And no, we're an Aussie company. I want to know how many Aussie dollars I've got in the bank. Well, eventually I convinced him to do it and buy and sell in US dollars and take the banks out of play.
Yeah.
And it's It's next generation of strength.
One of the other things I've seen in the market over the last 10 to 15 years is I guess we're going towards more of a bigger style of boat. We're not building small boats anymore.
40 used to be, wow, I've got a 40-footer.
Exactly right. I'm talking about this event, you know. Back in the days, you used to sell a 40-footer to a couple, and now that same couple are quite happy buying a 70 plus.
Yeah.
Do you think does that feed much back into the business model? The bigger boat, the higher margins, the lower volume?
The one thing that I'll say to that, there is a 24-metre chop.
Sure.
24 metre and above, you go into super yacht.
Yep.
And we do talk about this internally as well. And, without telling everyone what our plans are and our strategy is, I always maintain, and we're releasing a new boat at Sanctuary Cove Boat Show at the bottom end, not at the top end. To build that smaller boat, it's challenging. It's hard. How do I make a global boat that's different, that works in all markets, competitive on price, brings new people into the brand, or they've been up in the big stuff and they want to come down. Not everyone always goes up.
Sure, yep.
There are other people that have been up, circumstances change, but I still want to own a Riv, so that they're on the way down as well. That's okay. So we're releasing this new boat at the show, which is at the bottom end of the scale, not the top end. So we don't just chase margin, we chase what do we need in the family of boats.
To make them offering more rounded.
And keep feeding it. You talk about people and in the manufacturing side, but it's also people in the distribution and retail side that I've got to look after and consider as well. When you've had customers that have had 11, 12, 13,
I was going to ask you, what's the record?
I think 14 is the record.
14 is the record for sequential ownership?
Yep.
Wow, incredible.
So that's the record at the moment. We've just had another customer order his 11th boat, gets it next year, and hey, Wes, I'm getting older. Can you get me that boat quicker? There's a bit of that goes on. We've just handed over a 58 for Perth, and that's the 4th boat for that customer. And he just sent me an email this morning. He's up off your poon to Rodney and I. This is the best thing I've ever seen. This is the best boat. Congratulations. Rah, rah, rah. These guys are awesome. This boat's awesome. Blah, blah, blah.
Incredible brand feedback. I mean, ownership aside, to have a brand that's existed over that period of time and be able to take people up and down and over that ownership journey is quite incredible.
And sometimes they might jump out and go bigger in the super yacht field.
Sure,
We've just had that to a customer in New Zealand who's bought a 645, sent me an email of great to be back in the family, really excited. But he went to 115 for a while and then come back down.
But then you've got obviously, added challenges around once you get over a certain length with insurances, with having a skipper, with having a crew, and where to put them all, and it's a totally different animal, isn't it?
And I think we've defined we play really well from 40 feet to 80 feet. That's the space, Riviera, Australia, and the product for that market here. And then there's other brands above us, and there's other brands below us, but that's the space we want to play in, and let's focus on being great in that space.
Well, also the Australian market loves owner-operator, right? The Australian market loves owner-operator, and that sort of puts a bit of a cap on your sizing as well.
Yeah.
But there are nothing of all the berths you're going to need.
I mean, that's right.
You need a 20, 25 metre pen. They don't exactly grow on marinas. They're a scarce little beast. Those.
I wonder how you were going to get out of that.
Did you like that? Did you like that? There it was.
That's exactly right. And, they're not building berths, marinas quick enough and that sort of thing. So, you're seeing it change.
Another big challenge for the future is obviously power. You're obviously a big manufacturing facility. It takes a lot of power to run these operations. Cost of power must be substantial in the running costs of the operation. Businesses are drawing more and more. Populations are growing. And
let me say, Wally, it's not only cost; it's reliability. And this is one thing that the government doesn't talk about right now in this election cycle. You cannot run the world on solar and wind. It just will not work.
You're calling bulldust on it?
Yeah, absolute bulldust. And, there's a lot of lies being told around it. So what does Riviera need? One thing is cost. The other thing is reliability. If I'm infusing a hull and the power goes out, I'm screwed. What did that hull cost? 100 grand?
Gone.
So reliable power. So we've got 200 kilowatts of power on our roof now, but the power goes out. We've got one generator, but it won't run the whole site. So we're doing an exercise right now on power with some high engineers, generators, diesel powered, 2 backups, not auto switch over, but manual, because we've got 24/7 security on site. We can manually switch it over. We're okay with that. We're looking at solar on each individual factory, because every individual factory, and there's 20 odd factories at Riviera, have different power demands. So what solar can we put on each roof? What can we do? How does that feed back into the network? But right now, used to be the opposite to where it is right now. The most expensive power is off-peak. Why? Because the cost of storage. When you're shutting down the coal-fired power stations that produce 24/7, they didn't know whether the sun was out or not. Solar only works in the peak of the day when power used to be cheap. Now, an off-peak used to be cheap. Now it's the opposite. It's swung the 180 degrees. And that's not me. That's our electrical consultants and engineers telling us that, because the cost of storage, the cost of batteries is high.
Right.
And, we're shutting down coal-fired power stations and we're not allowed to talk about nuclear.
No.
So...
But we've been mining nuke for 70 years in this country and shipping it around the planet. And we've got arrangements with America, with China, with Europe, UK.
Look at the coal.
Right.
Now,
and
whether you're burning coal in China and you're allowed to pollute because they're not part of the Paris Accord, they're building, I think, 140 coal-fired power stations, and we've got 6, and we want to shut them down.
Yeah, but it's outside the environment when they do.
Oh, yeah, that's
Thank you, John.
not in our bubble, so it is absolutely crazy what we are doing with power and not being able to have what's Australia need rather than what's the Liberal Party or the Labor Party or the Greens. What's right for Australia, and this is the problem with our politics. It's about bulldust and being popular rather than how do we make Australia the best sustainable country, cleanest, best, and how do we get there, and what's that journey look like?
I mean, cheap, reliable power, the things that we could do, the things that we could achieve in this country rather than just shipping ore offshore, but, value adding here and shipping around the world. But, manufacturing basically anything for global markets. Once you've got cheap, reliable power.
Invariably, the answer is going to be nuclear.
It is.
But and Bill Gates is one of the biggest greenies in the world. He has made that statement. And him and Warren Buffett are building a nuclear power station. Now, is it a massive one? When people think of nuclear, they think of Chernobyl, they think of Japan, where they had meltdowns and this, that, and the others. There was a reason those things happened.
Yes.
And it's understanding the reason and why do we do it. I do know confidentially there is some very big players working on small nuclear microprocessors. You can power a nuclear ship for 35 years or a submarine, never come up for air. That technology exists today. And you can look at nuclear power stations that fit where Liddell coal-fired power station used to be. It's not a massive one. It's not a $15 billion project. It might be a $5 billion project.
And you tap into the infrastructure
that's there. Into the infrastructure that's there. But they're trying to put solar all around it on the farms or, on the coal stuff. So
and use all the arable land. For
the
whole thing is the dairy farming.
The worst part is there's not a mature, sensible conversation.
Yeah.
What does Australia need in the next 30 years? It's a bipartisan political football, so no one makes a decision.
No, it's
It's back to why I don't build boats for them.
Planning for decades to come. As you say, it's very short-sighted. It's just that election cycle every time, and it's never changed. It's never stopped.
Sadly, that's the way it is. And, we've got uranium. We've got places everywhere that we can put uranium waste and that sort of thing. In Europe, they're opening up nuclear power stations in Germany that they'd shut down. Why? Because they have to.
Yes.
If they don't, they're going to be out of power. Look at Europe. Look at that as a case study and how they deal with the waste and what they do, and they're green, green and green.
Yeah.
So-
There's only so many solar panels and windmills we can have.
And the windmills are terrible.
Yeah.
When you look at how they have to put the foundations, the steel, the infrastructure to put up one windmill, and how much carbon has been burnt to get that one windmill, and how reliable they are, we are mad.
Not to mention the disposal
Yeah.
of that windmill
Yeah.
afterwards.
Blades.
Yeah.
Blades and all of that.
Yeah.
It is silly.
They
My
are.
favourite had to be the digging, getting the bulldozers out, powered by diesel, of course, to dig
Yeah,
the
yeah,
trenches
yeah.
to push the carbon blades in
Yeah.
to hide them so the satellites couldn't find them.
Oh, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
So where's Riviera, or probably you personally, sitting with the whole argument around electric propulsion for vessels? There's no secret that we on this panel are a fan of a litre of diesel and the power output that you get out of it. What's the future looking like?
There's going to be lots of things tried, from foiling to, electric, this, that, and the other. I don't see in the next 10 years there's going to be a solution of alternate fuel, electricity, or foils or anything else that suits our style of boat. Say that, 0 to 10. This way, 10 is forward. And I'm talking to MAN, MTU, Volvo, Penta, and they're all getting their heads together as well as to what they can do. You think of the amount of outboards that are built today. And one of the guys at Brunswick has said to me, Wes, we've got the best electric small motors you can have, outboards. I can't sell them. Can't sell them.
That's definitely been coming
That's
through
been
from all the
happening.
sources.
You look at the electric cars and the myth around them, and the electric car market is reversing big time.
A lot of it's the infrastructure as well.
Correct. But they get sold to Bulldust. They get sold that Bulldust. And Australia's a big country. Now, electric car in CBD Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, golf buggy type mentality makes a lot of sense. But driving here to Melbourne or here to Sydney and planning that trip and having to plug in for hours doesn't make a lot of sense. Our trucks, the lifeblood of Australia, our trucking industry, doesn't make a lot of sense on long haul. But there's local delivery, makes a lot of sense. When you're going back to a depot at night where you can have solar and other alternate sources of power, it's a blend. It's never one.
Yeah, it's not one
But, there's
solution.
talk of hydrogen, there's talk of methanol, there's talk of alternate fuels, there's talk of electricity. None of it's coming quickly.
Well, I believe you need 60 times the volume of hydrogen to do the same job as diesel. So that's not.
And then
It's
do
not
I want
practical.
hydrogen bombs running around everywhere?
Well, that's right.
It
And not-
blows up big too.
And the
That's a great
vessel
history.
and the vessel that has to hold that liquid hydrogen as well.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean the recreational, the regulations more so around hydrogen at the moment is quite hard. It's above deck storage. You can't have them underneath the deck. It's tricky.
And
The
there's
one
a bit
thing
of,
that I would say to that we will move into with absolute certainty, and we're doing it now, is people in Australia and New Zealand in particular want to run their generators less and less. So lithium batteries, the batteries we've been fitting for just on 5 years now, is a game changer. You add that with solar panels on the hard tops and everything, and what we're getting out of that. Typical customer will say to me, Wes, I'm happy to run my generator 3 hours a day. In the afternoon, done my water sports, done my fishing, cleaning up, done diving, whatever. I'm washing up, I'm cleaning, I'm cooking, I'm doing all of that. I'm cooling the boat down for the night time. I'm happy to run it for 3 hours, the generator. In America, I'll run for 24 hours and I'll go home if it stops. But here, we're more practical, and I don't want the generator running when I'm on anchor at night, upsetting my neighbours, doing all of that. So for us, it's a matter of minimising generator runtime, maximising quiet time. How does that work?
which is why you're out there, isn't it?
Stabilisation. Everyone wants stabilisation. Everyone wants inverters. It's, what can I get the performance out of all of those things? So the first step for us is not propulsion, it's the ancillary things, because we have proven to ourselves and to Volvo, 2 electric motors, 55 kilowatt each, at 9 knots, doesn't go as far as with a D4 generator, 2 D13s ticking over at 9 knots. The 26 litres ticking over on idle, 9 knots, will go further than one generator to run those 2 electric motors. It'll use more fuel. When you look at that, you go,
How's that the case?
how's that work?
Yeah.
Can't work. It's the truth.
Yes.
It's the
But
truth.
just working at lower revs and.
Correct.
Yeah. What are the big differences you see between your 2 biggest markets are obviously domestically in the States? What are the biggest differences you see between consumers there? You just talked about the generator usage.
You touched on it before when you said Australia loves owner-operators. We tend to find owner-operators in the US market, don't get me wrong, but there is more captains there than what you would have here. So owner-operator is first thing. Climate is second. We are the skin cancer capital of the world. So we're driven to be in the shade, indoor-outdoor living, and not worship the sun. Europe still worships the sun for a bit, and so does the US. So indoor-outdoor living, climate, owner-operator, I'd say, are the biggest differences. The rest of it, and the US is more about, because it is hot, humid, pretty bad in Florida and most of it, or you go to Seattle, Washington, Alaska, it's freezing cold. So climate plays a factor. But they run their generators 24/7. They shore power a boat, marina to marina, shore power. Some of them don't drop the anchor, some do. So
Whereas here,
Pin the throttles the whole way.
yeah, speed matters in the US market because they get a lot of flat water.
So I guess one of the big things that we've talked about in terms of the manufacturing is the very, very large facility on Waterway Drive, just a little bit further down from here inside Garage 25 at the Boat Works. But we recently had Tropical Cyclone Alfred sort of brewed up for a while offshore. It was only Category 2 when it hit. But I think the biggest thing is there was a lot that you had to do at the factory just to get going. But people forget that there was also a very significant cost. Please tell us a little bit about that, Wes.
Yeah, one of the problems with the cyclone was the length of time it sat offshore. So it seemed like eternity to hit the shore, which made it drag out a lot longer than it really needed to or wanted to. So we lost about 3.5 days of production.
Which is expensive, isn't it?
Which is very expensive. 900 plus people a day coming to work, and you lose 3.5 days. The government put out a text message to everyone, shut everything down tomorrow. That was probably a day too early. I understand why they did it, because if they don't, they'll get in trouble or, not be popular. So they take a conservative view. But if that message had been a little bit different, a little bit more considered, it would have put a little bit more onus. Hey, there's a warning coming. It's moving very slow. You might be right on Thursday, but Friday's definitely out. Then we could have made the commercial decision. Instead it was, everything's shutting down tomorrow. And this went out Wednesday lunchtime. It didn't hit until Saturday morning. And really, we didn't get flooded until Monday morning. So the tides and the rain and what happened over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, is what caused us to be flooded on Monday morning. So thankfully, we know what to do with that. We're well organised. We're well prepared. Kyle had a team come in Monday morning, chase the floodwaters back out, the silt and everything that's built up. We started the shift at 12 o'clock on Monday rather than 6 a.m. So we lost that 6-hour period, and there was probably 30% of the staff turned up, between 30 and 35 of the staff turned up at 12. But it meant we were back in 100% on Tuesday morning. But we lost 3.5 days of production. And when you're producing the amount of boats that we do and what happens, it takes a lot to pick that back up.
And just to be clear for everybody, it is an incredibly expansive area, but I think there was something like 400 to 500 mils through a lot of the facility.
Yeah.
That you then not only had to get rid of the water, but also the muck, which is the hardest
Correct.
part.
It leaves a fair degree of, 75 to 100 mil of silt, tapers out as you go up the property. It's designed for that to happen. It was one of our development requirements, which we have a Q1, a Q10 flood level, a Q20 and a Q100. And most of the buildings are up on the Q100, but we effectively got to chase the flood water out, get rid of the silt, which is what they did on Monday morning. By Monday lunchtime, we were done and it was all finished. And that was all about the backup of the tide, the rainwater coming down from the mountains and so forth. So it's not unusual. We've done it 4 times in 25 years. We knew we have to do it and we're ready for it and we prepare for it on the Wednesday before. So move everything to higher ground and get ready.
So Q2 is actually Q5, but don't worry about that right now.
That's right.
At least you're ready.
We're calling Bulldust on Q10.
Yes, that is true.
So, Wallace, do you think we've got a situation where the government probably could learn some lessons out of the situation at Riviera?
It'd be great to bring in somebody from government at some point, wouldn't it? And fire a few questions at them.
No
But
doubt somebody's going to hear it.
I think everyone's got fairly low expectations when government opens their mouth and talks about these initiatives. I don't think anyone particularly latches onto it, and they see it as the stunt that it probably is. But
the
yeah,
next 7 years is going to be all about the Olympics, isn't it? And the announcements of today and the Olympics. I mean, governments, that's going to be the narrative that's been talked about, and they're leaving it very late
yes,
to get everything built or decided at a cost-effective manner for what's got to be done. New government, new ideas, new approach, all of that. For me, here on the Gold Coast and loving the Gold Coast, there's no vision for what, they always talk about the beaches from the cyclone. Beaches got destroyed. What's the Gold Coast known for? Tourism and beaches and theme parks, right? Mm. Got to get it open by Easter. Got to get the beaches back. That's fine. Agree. No argument from me. And that's great that they're getting into it. But there's the Broadwater full of sand. There's poor navigation channels. There's poor anchorages. There's so much that could be done if there was a vision and a plan. And in the last 25 years, there's been so many plans presented for the Broadwater, for sailing and passive things and anchorages and all different sorts of things. But it is not a good place for boaters and connecting through to Moreton Bay or running ferries or whatever through to Brisbane. Everything goes up and down this M1 or the railway line, whereas you could have high-speed ferries. You could see that as an asset, not as a problem.
yeah,
But it's seen as a rich boys' playground. So one side of government's never going to support it and the other side's not going to be there long enough to do anything about it. So that's what will happen, And again, no, we can't build infrastructure for the rich. But hang on, what about the guy who's got a tinny or a fishing or family and he's working hard and doing this? Where are the boat ramps? Where are the infrastructure? There's not a boat ramp on the western side of the Coomera River. Look at all the housing. Mm. So they send them all down to the Spit. What's wrong with going to the Spit? The density of cars, the roadways. Wouldn't you put boat ramps here rather than put them on the M1? More cars? No, that'd be common. There's a thing called common sense. It's the opposite of bulldust.
but it's not that common.
But they're the two things that are missing, which, thankfully America is starting to call bulldust on the madness and a bit more common sense in what's happening in the US,
Yes.
albeit a little bit controversial from time to time.
And a little bit chaotic, but it's certainly shaking up the system. So I guess just sort of coming to a little bit of a close, the future for Riviera, maybe the next decade, where do you see Riv in 10 years' time?
Wes is still going to be there, right?
Yeah, he'll still be here. We'll interview him.
Oh, look, that's the first thing. Tick that box.
It has been said Rodney will never let me retire. That has been said. But look, why I left Riviera in 2008, I always promised myself that if I stopped loving what I was doing, I'd stop doing it. And so I did. Made that decision very quickly in a week, and I didn't like the guys I was working with at that period of time. First 5 years private equity, fabulous. Last year, terrible. And they did some stuff that I didn't agree with ethically and morally, so I'm out. You guys are smarter than me. I'm out. 6 weeks later, Lehman Brothers fell over and the world changed. Now, in what got reported to me is you got a sales and distribution problem. That's why the market's declining. Go and hire a guy to fix it. 3 key indicators in our business: forward orders, deposits, stock build up. If those 3 are going against you, get off the gas. Something's coming. And it's not a light down a tunnel. It's a train going to hit you if you don't get off the gas. So I learnt that from the 87 stock market crash, and you know what happened. Those three were going against us back then, and that's what you got to watch. So for us now, with Rodney owning Riviera, he's never put demands on me to be this big or make this much money. He just said, Wes, I want to be the best at everything we do. That doesn't mean we're the biggest. So to be the best, take care of our customers first and foremost. Take care of our staff, people. We're in the people business. We just happen to build boats. While ever I'm enjoying that and, you know, getting older next week, you know, I'll keep doing it. When I stop enjoying it and stop thinking I'm adding value, I'll stop doing it. So the next 10 years, steady as she goes. I've got a fabulous team of people at Coomera here, and that doesn't happen overnight. It's taken longer than I expected to get that back to where it needed to be. Steady as she goes. You know, the product is really good. The product is globally acceptable. We're entering our fifth generation, just starting to come through. You think about Riviera, 44 years of operation. You know, we're now entering into that fifth generation of style, what we are, who we are, run that through the family, then what's next. So
You were talking about forward orders right here, right now, the global scenario, and specifically the marine scenario. There are some doing very well. There are some that are potentially having issues. It is very, very difficult at the moment. Forward orders is always a great indicator. Riv is in fine position.
yeah, look, pre-COVID to now, and forward orders have dropped away in the last 18 months, shall we say, but we're still 7 times what we were pre-COVID.
Wow.
So if you go back to 1920 and roll forward to today,
2020.
yeah,
1920.
yeah,
We're all
yeah,
like grey, what we are
2019, 2020, and roll forward to now 5 years, you know, the forward order book is 7 times in dollar terms what it was back then. Are we arrogant about that? Are we complacent about that? No, we just work harder. We just work harder to make sure that that doesn't get eroded. I've been in this game too long, and I'm always educating Kyle and Richard and the key team what to look at. And there's a couple of things within Riviera. They call it Wes's kitchen table, which is our production way I did things in the 80s with a production flow chart in colours. And they still do it that same way. And then it's the way we present a 3-year look forward of what's sold, what's not sold, what's dealer stock, and how all that looks. And in 3 pieces of paper, I can tell you where the risks are. So, you know, we're watching that stuff all the time. Bit old-fashioned, which is the way I am, but, you know, they tend to want to do everything in a computer or a spreadsheet or a whatever. Yeah. I say, do it this way, print it out, put an A3 sheet of paper, you can see it.
But that's real world experience, and having been through a number of cycles, and you know, having that old head, and sometimes trying to get the old head on the young bodies is not easy. But if they've seen a decade or two of really good times and they've grown up, you know,
I can walk the factory and say there's too much stock there.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
No, it's not.
Okay.
What do you know? He's right again.
Yeah.
There's too much stock there. You can smell it. You can smell it. You can see it. So, you know, I don't need a computer to tell me how to build boats or what stock levels we should be. That the formula's well proven.
Okay, well, I think we'll say thank you at that point very much for being on Bulwarks and Bulldust. Really enjoyed it, and we look forward to having you back inside the next 10 years, because you're definitely going to be a part of the scenery.
Do you think most boat builders know what a bulwark is?
Oh, I would hope so, but you know.
we don't know. We're not going to put that on anyone. But
we think
let me
most
just
of them
say,
know what Bulldust is.
Yeah,
and let me
that
just
one's
say
easy.
the alternative name, which was the Ford Ships and something else, just probably wouldn't have got through the PC meter.
Yeah.
So Bulwarks and Bulldust it is.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Wes.
Thanks, Wes.
Thanks, Wes.
Wes, thanks so much for being on Bulwarks and Bulldust. It's been a real delight, and thank you for exposing so much bulldust and giving us a reason to listen. Thank you. Look forward
Thanks,
to seeing
John.
you. You're going to be on. You're going to be around in the business for a long, long time.
Yeah, I intend to be, and while ever I keep enjoying it, and Rodney and I get to grow a great team at Coomera. You know, there's not a lot of bulldust down the road, but there's probably a bit being spoken here today. But yeah, it's fun, and we'll keep making some fun and great boats and great people. So yeah, enjoying it. Thank you for your time.
Terrific.